She was ready to die after intimacy, but the human male just kissed her asterisk. Kellen Drake woke up on a strange bed made of glowing moss, warm and springy beneath him. The soft lavender light of Velassa's twin moons filtered through the translucent walls of the tent. His body ached in the best possible way, like he'd just run a marathon, except instead of metals, there was a silver-skinned, naked alien woman curled up beside him, snoring softly. He smiled. Well, that was something. But then came the click, the unmistakable sound of a plasma pistol charging up. He froze. Siren. The beautiful Velassa huntress he'd spent the night with was sitting upright, wide-eyed. Her shimmering silver skin tinted slightly blue with panic, and she was pointing her weapon right at his chest. "You're still alive?" she gasped. Kellen blinked. Yeah, I think so." "Why wouldn't I be?" Her hand trembled slightly on the trigger. "Because after that kind of mating, most males explode." That got his attention. "Wait, what?" he said, slowly sitting up, careful not to make any sudden moves. "Explode how? Like, emotionally, no?" she shouted. "It's literally internal combustion from hormone overload. That much pleasure is usually fatal to Velassa males." Kellen stared at her. "That was ... fatal level?" She narrowed her eyes. He didn't even pass out. "I mean, I napped," he offered. "Does that count?" Siren's eyes were now the size of dinner plates, by the stars. "Are all human males like this?" Kellen smirked, brushing his tousled hair back. "Define like this?" She ignored his grin and lowered the weapon slowly, though her expression stayed wary, like she was expecting him to melt or spontaneously combust at any second. "I thought I killed you," she whispered, more to herself than him. "I thought I'd have to dispose of your body and explain to the clan that I accidentally vaporized a soft-worlder during mating." "Well, good news," Kellen said cheerfully, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. "Still intact. Breathing. Kinda hungry, actually." She looked stunned. Kellen rubbed the back of his neck. "Look, don't take this the wrong way, but is exploding after sex really normal here?" "For Velassa males, yes," she said, still watching him like a ticking bomb. "Our nervous systems can't handle that kind of intensity. It overloads. The body, they either pass out completely or ... boom." He winced. "Romantic. You were supposed to be..." "Test subject," she admitted slowly. "A soft-worlder with no risk of bonding. I didn't expect you to enjoy it so much or survive it." "Oh, that's flattering," Kellen said dryly. "Glad I made the cut." She stepped closer, scanning him with a small glowing device. It beeped. No burns. No internal damage. Heart rate steady. Muscles fully recovered. He flexed one arm playfully. "Told you, we humans are built for endurance." She looked at him, disbelief turning slowly into something else. Curiosity, ... And a little wonder? "What are you?" she asked softly. Kellen leaned back on his elbows, giving her a roguish grin. Just a guy with a knack for making a good first impression. Siren's gaze dropped briefly to his lower half, where the bedsheet had begun to tent noticeably. Her face flushed a shimmering violet. "And you're still functional," she whispered. "Fully," Kellen said, his grin widening. "Round 2. She stepped back, stunned. "But ... how?" He shrugged. "Human biology. We don't explode. At worst, we get sore and order breakfast." Her eyes flicked toward the entrance of the tent, then back to him. "If anyone finds out you survived the ritual, they'll demand to know everything. They'll think I've discovered some kind of miracle mate." "Miracle, huh?" I like that," Kellen said, standing up. He winced slightly and stretched. "But maybe keep the miracle part quiet. I'd rather not be dissected by your scientists." She tilted her head, confused. Why would anyone cut open such a perfectly functioning male? "Trust me," he muttered. "It's happened." They stood in silence for a moment. The tension shifted. The danger had passed. Now, something else was hanging in the air: awkwardness, curiosity, ... attraction. Finally, she said, "You really want to go again?" He raised an eyebrow. "Not scared this time?" Her smile was slow and predatory. "Now I'm just curious. How many times you can survive?" Kellen laughed. "Only one way to find out." And with that, she tossed the plasma pistol onto the floor. Velassa had just found its first human legend. Kellen didn't know what was stronger right now, his sore muscles, his curiosity, or the look Siren was giving him. It wasn't fear. Anymore, it was something closer to, like she was trying to figure out if he was a miracle, a mutant, or some ancient mating god come to life. He'd take any of those titles. "Honestly, you're serious?" she asked as she circled him slowly, looking like she expected him to suddenly burst into flames. "You really feel fine?" "Better than fine," Kellen said, rolling his shoulder. "Though my legs feel like I climbed a space elevator blindfolded. Worth it." She looked at him like he'd just spoken a forbidden spell. "No Velasari male has ever lasted that long," she said quietly. "You didn't even black out." Kellen shrugged with a grin. "Maybe your guys need more cardio." She stopped walking and just stared at him. "Your body chemistry is completely different. You didn't respond to our pheromone flush at all. You were just ... functioning on instinct." "Is that what we're calling it?" Kellen said. "'Cause instinct never felt that good before." Siren crossed her arms, but the corner of her lips twitched. "You think this is funny?" "I think it's weird, awesome, and probably something your science council should write papers on. But mostly, it's kind of funny." Siren sat on the bed, still completely naked, still glowing faintly in the moonlight, and Kellen couldn't help but glance at her again. The Velasari were tall, athletic, with radiant silver-blue skin that shimmered like metal under light. She looked like someone carved her from moonlight and bad decisions. Dangerous, curious, a little turned on. He was in trouble. "So," she began slowly, voice softer now, "you're not bonded to me." Kellen raised an eyebrow. "Bonded? Our mating releases a chemical trigger. If both partners survive, bond forms. It's automatic, deep, permanent. That's why we only mate during selection season, but humans aren't Velasari, so maybe... She trailed off. Kellen blinked. "So let me get this straight. Your people treat sex like a final exam? You pass, you get a mate for life. If you fail, you're dead." "That's oversimplifying," she said flatly. He gave her a look. "But accurate," she admitted with a sigh. Kellen whistled. "I talk about pressure." Siren watched. You're not from here. You're not even from this sector. What are you doing on Velassa?" "Ship trouble. Got caught in a debris cloud. Systems fried. I limped to the nearest port. A local trader told me about the jungle tech ruins, said they might have compatible parts. You wandered into my hunting grounds. You nearly skewered me with that electric spear of yours. You stepped in front of my kill. You were about to shoot a wounded animal. I was the wounded animal," she shot back. They stared at each other. Then, suddenly, she laughed. It was the first time he'd heard it, a low, musical sound that made the hairs on his arms stand up. "You're not like anyone I've met," she said. "I get that a lot." Siren stood again, walking over to a low table where a thin, glowing sheet of fabric lay folded. She wrapped it around her body like it was made of air. The material clung to her curves, more teasing than covering. "My clan is going to have questions," she said. Kellen flopped back on the bed, hands behind his head. "Let me guess, why is the alien still alive? Or like why? Didn't you finish him? Velasari culture isn't exactly human-friendly." Kellen frowned. "You saying they'll try to kill me?" she said after a pause. "But they will want to study you. Dissect, possibly, politely of course. Oh well, as long as they say, please." Siren approached the bed again, her face serious now. "You should leave before sunrise. Take your parts. Get back to your ship." Kellen looked at her for a long moment. "You mean run? I mean survive?" He sat up slowly. "But what if I don't want to run?" She blinked. "You don't even know me. You're not wrong," he said. "But last night was more than just a wild alien hookup, at least for me." She looked away. "It was ... something, but we can't bond. You're not Velasari. Kellen stood and took a slow step toward her. I don't care about biology or pheromones or customs. I care about you. You saved me in that jungle. You didn't run when I made you laugh. You didn't explode when I teased you. That's enough for me to stay. You're insane. Probably. She stared at him again, this time with something deeper in her gaze. Fear, maybe. Or hope. She stepped forward, placed her hand on his chest. You really want to do this? Be hunted. Judged. Laughed at by my people. Took her hand in his. I'm a human male. Siren. We don't explode. We endure. She laughed again. But this time, it was softer. Sadder. You have no idea what you've started. Kellen leaned in close. Then you'd better stick around and show me. Outside, the twin moons hung low in the sky. The jungle whispered with wind and life. And deep in the Velassa capital, the ancient council had already felt the disturbance. In the bonding field, a human had survived the ritual. And worse. She'd smiled at him afterward. The elders would not be pleased. But one thing was certain, Kellen Drake had just made mating season a lot more interesting. Asterisk. By the time the twin suns of Velassa began to rise, casting golden light over the jungle canopies, Kellen was already regretting not sneaking off quietly in the night. Not because he wanted to leave, but because now it was too late. Siren's clan had arrived. 12 warriors, each taller than Kellen, armed to the teeth, and radiating the kind of we don't need reasons to kill energy that made most bounty hunters nervous. They moved like panthers and glared like executioners. Their armor glinted silver and black under the sunlight. And every single one of them looked like they'd been carved out of granite and combat hormones. And right there in the middle of them was Kellen Drake, bare-chested, slightly hungover. And, according to Siren, the first human in recorded Velassa history to survive what they called the cycle of flesh. He was also wearing her clanmate cloak, a shimmering piece of woven light that apparently meant something. Don't speak, Siren whispered from behind him as they stood before the clan elders' circle. Don't make eye contact. Don't try to be funny. Kellen glanced sideways. Should I breathe, or is that banned too? Look, only if you can do it quietly. The elder stepped forward. Her name was Vakira, Siren's mother. She was even taller than the rest, with long streaks of blue running down her silver skin like war paint. Her voice was like steel dipped in lava. You claimed the soft worlder. As a mate, Siren bowed her head slightly. Yes, elder. He survived the bonding. The signs were clear and you marked him. I did. Kellen resisted the urge to wave. Vakira's eyes narrowed. You desecrate our traditions. Kellen cleared his throat. Okay, hold on. Siren elbowed him hard. Not now. It was too late. Vakira turned her full attention on him. The temperature somehow dropped 10 degrees. You speak? Kellen smiled awkwardly. Well, yeah? Comes with the whole being alive package? The clan murmured. One even let out a low hiss. Silence. Vakira barked. He silenced, but not before adding quietly rude. The elder stepped closer. You are not of us. Your blood is weak. Your mating customs are barbaric. Kellen raised an eyebrow. Barbaric? Lady, you guys explode after sex. More hissing. Even Siren, Afem, Ed, B.A., Kira's lip curled. Your tongue will be your undoing. It's gotten me into worse, Kellen muttered, then tried to recover. Look, I didn't come here to insult anyone. I didn't plan any of this. I crash-landed, found some ruins, met Siren in the jungle, and next thing I knew, boom. Well, not boom, obviously, he grinned. No one else did. He sighed. The point is, I didn't know the rules. I still don't. But I'm not backing down just because your traditions say I shouldn't be alive. Siren's eyes flickered with something between panic and admiration. Vakira stepped back, her expression unreadable. The council must decide, she said finally. Until then, the human remains here, under guard. Guard, Kellen said, folding his arms. What? In case I seduce someone else to death? It's time, a few of the younger warriors chuckled. Va Kira's gaze sharpened. You will be silent. I'm starting to see why no one survives dating here, Kellen muttered. They were led into the clan stronghold, a massive structure carved into the jungle cliffs. With flowing energy barriers instead of doors and waterfalls cascading down from the trees like living architecture, Siren walked beside him, arms tense. You shouldn't have spoken. Was I supposed to let her call me weak? Yes, that's how respect works here, Kellen snorted. You people have a weird definition of respect. She stopped. Suddenly, turned to face him. You don't understand, Kellen. You're the first outsider to ever be claimed and live to talk about it. You're not just some curiosity now. You're a threat to everything they believe. He stepped closer, voice quieter. Then why didn't you let me leave last night? Siren looked away, jaw tight. Because I didn't want you to. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was heavy. Like something was settling in the space between their hearts that hadn't been there before. You bonded, she said finally. My body released the signal. You weren't supposed to trigger it, but you did. What does that mean? It means I don't want you to leave. Kellen reached for her hand. She let him take it. Then I won't, he said simply. Later. That night, he sat in the private guest quarters. If you could call a glowing glass cell private, Siren had left to speak to the elders. Kellen was alone, thinking. He'd had flings before, fights, women who left, women who stayed. But he'd never felt this weird combination of fear, connection, and stubborn loyalty before. Siren wasn't just hot. She was real, sharp, brave, terrifying. And she chose him, even if her people wanted to skin him for it. A soft noise made him turn. The door shimmered open, and Siren stepped inside. They're deciding tomorrow, she said quietly. What's the verdict? They'll either let us bond formally or challenge you. Challenge me, Kellen asked. To what? A dance-off. She looked him dead in the eye. Combat. He stared at her. Great, that's fair. Da-da-da-da-da. What's my weapon? She paused. What? He said. You are the weapon. Kellen sat down slowly. Okay, I really need to have a talk with my libido about picking safer dates. She smirked, then walked over and sat beside him. You still have a choice? Leave before sunrise. I'll tell them you escaped. He shook his head. Not happening, why? He reached out, brushing her cheek with his fingers. Because I don't think I was supposed to crash here. I think I was supposed to meet you. And maybe I'm supposed to survive this too. Her eyes gleamed under the room's low light. You really believe that? He kissed her softly this time. Yeah. And besides, humans don't explode. We evolve. She smiled then, wide and full, and rested her forehead against his. Outside. The moon was rising again, and deep within the Velassa stronghold, the council was already preparing the challenge of the cycle. No human had ever survived a Velassa bonding before. But Kellen Drake wasn't just any human. He was about to prove it. Asterisk the next morning came with drums. Low, bone-rattling drums. That echoed across the cliffside like the heartbeat of the planet itself. Kellen was already awake, standing near the translucent wall of his room, staring out over the jungle canopy. The sun had barely begun to rise. But the Velassa were already preparing for the day's spectacle. His spectacle. Siren appeared. At his door, dressed in ceremonial armor's leek, silver blue plates that clung to her like liquid metal. Her hair was braided with woven lights, and her expression was unreadable. Kellen raised an eyebrow. Morning already? I was hoping I'd wake up to pancakes and not a death match. She stepped inside without a word and handed him a folded piece of cloth. He unwrapped it to reveal a sleeveless black tunic and a utility belt. Ceremonial combat gear? He asked. Tradition, she replied, though her voice was tight. You'll wear that. They'll arm you at the ring. Slipped it on. So, just to confirm, this is still about me surviving great sex? She gave him a hard look. This is about you surviving my people. They walked in silence down the winding path to the combat ring-in ancient arena carved into the rock, surrounded by bioluminescent vines and jagged stone pillars. The crowd had already gathered, hundreds of Velassa, most of whom looked like they wanted to see just how fast a human could bleed. Kellen didn't like his odds, especially when he spotted today's entertainment. His opponent, a male named Jodder, nearly 7 feet tall, broad as a tank, covered in ceremonial tattoos and scars that made him look more beast than man. He was sharpening a bone-bladed spear with a piece of obsidian and smiling, like he'd already planned where to hang Kellen's skull. Siren turned to Kellen and whispered, "If you get injured, you yield. Do not try to prove anything." 2. Late for that, he muttered. The clan elder Vakira stood on a stone platform above them. Her voice rang out like a war horn. Today a challenge is honored. An outsider seeks to claim the bond of a Velassa huntress. He will prove his worth or fall. The crowd shouted in unison, something guttural and harsh. Kellen wasn't fluent in Velassa yet, but he was fairly certain it translated to something. Like kill the tiny off-order, he was handed a weapon. Not a spear, not a sword, a staff. He turned it in his hands. Weighted, solid, but no blade. Jodder, on the other hand, had a spear the size of a small tree. Great, Kellen muttered. I get a stick, he gets a tree trunk with a knife on it. Siren leaned close. You're faster. Use that. He's not expecting it. He looked at her.
I'll say.
Anything else I should know before I die dramatically in front of your extended? Family, she hesitated. There's one tradition. The trial of flesh ends if you draw first blood. His eyes widened. Wait, so I don't have to win. Just bleed him before he bleeds you. He nodded. Okay. Cut the giant muscle monster with the death stick, easy. The gong sounded. The crowd hushed, and Jodder stepped into the ring, stomping like a charging bull. Kellen took a deep breath, twirled the staff in his hands, and muttered under his breath, All right. Let's see if all those bar brawls back on Terra were good for something. Jodder lunged. Kellen rolled to the side, barely dodging the spear tip. The ground cracked where it struck. Too close, he darted forward, aiming for Jodder's leg with a wide sweep of the staff. The Velassa male blocked it easily and shoved him back with a roar. Tiny human, he growled. You insult our bloodline. Kellen backed away. Hey, I didn't ask to survive the Love Olympics, pal. Blame your sister. Eyes flared red. That was a joke, Kellen called. But the massive alien was already charging again. Kellen ducked, rolled, jabbed. The staff connected barely. Small crack across Jodder's ribs, but not enough. The crowd roared every time Kellen dodged, their cheers rising not out of support but out of bloodlust. He needed a strategy. Jodder was strong but slow. He telegraphed his moves. Kellen circled, jabbing low, ducking high, letting the bigger man tire himself. A few more glancing blows. Still no blood. Kellen's arms were burning, his breath coming in ragged gasps. One mistake, and he'd be a smear on the arena floor. Then it came. Jodder overreached. A downward slam meant to crush him. Kellen spun, dropped low, and drove the staff up with all his strength crack. The staff slammed under. Jodder's chin blood. A thin line of purple. Running from his jaw, the gong sounded. The crowd gasped. Then silence, then chaos. Velassa tradition demanded the fight stop. Kellen had one sword of Jodder stumbled back, wiping the blood with disbelief. Impossible. The elder raised her hand. Enough, she declared. The warriors stood down. The fight was over. Kellen stood there, panting, bleeding from his lip, arms shaking. Then came the applause. Not from the warriors, but from the young ones, the initiates, the unbonded. They started clapping, and more joined, and more. Within minutes, the whole arena was filled with the sound of Velassa, who weren't angry, they were inspired. Siren ran to him, her face lit up with something between pride and relief. You did it? I didn't die, Kellen. Wheezed. So yeah, I'd call that a win. You drew first blood. The rite is complete. He looked at her, dazed. Do I get a medal or something? She leaned in. You get me? They kissed, right there in the ring, in front of a whole crowd that had wanted him dead 30 minutes ago. And most surprisingly, they cheered via Kira. Watched from above, her face unreadable. She didn't clap. She didn't smile. She didn't stop it either. Later, in the quiet of the temple courtyard, as the two of them sat beneath the glowing trees, Siren whispered, "They're going to talk about this challenge for cycles." "Good," Kellen said, resting his hand on hers. "Let them talk." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You changed something today." "Yeah," he muttered, "my spine." She laughed and kissed his cheek. "Rest. The next trial comes soon," he frowned. "Next trial?" She looked at him innocently. "Introducing you to my father," he groaned. "Does he get a spear too?" "No," she smiled. "It's a plasma cannon." Kellen leaned back against the tree, eyes closed. "You better be worth it," he murmured. Ren curled up beside him. "I already decided you are." Above them, the moons of Velassa glowed bright to watching eyes over a bond that was no longer just biology, but something stronger, something human. Asterisk that night. Kellen dreamed of spear tips glowing eyes, and silver-skinned women who kissed like they were daring fate. He woke up the next morning with a sore back, a bruised ego, and a nervous feeling in his stomach he couldn't quite shake. At first, he thought it was the after-effects of the arena fight, or maybe the Velasari stew he'd eaten, which had a suspicious glow and tasted faintly like battery acid and mango. But no, it wasn't food. It wasn't bruises. It was her father, his. "Name is Kelther," Siron said, casually sliding a curved blade across her leg to sharpen it, like this was just any other conversation. "He's the commander of the Western Sky Clans." Kellen, who was sipping a strange Velasari root tea and trying not to look like breakfast, blinked. "Commander? Like army commander?" She nodded. "High commander. Warlord, technically." Kellen groaned. "Of course he is." She kept sharpening. "And he doesn't like humans." "Does anyone in your family not carry a weapon?" She paused.
My cousin is a monk."
"That sounds better. He fights with sound." Kellen muttered something under his breath and set the tea down. "All right. So what's the plan? Do I bow? Do I kneel? Do I pretend I have a terminal illness and escape the planet?" "Do nothing. You be polite." She stood up, adjusting the straps of her armor. "And whatever you do not make a joke." He tilted his head. "You're serious? Deadly?" He sighed. "You know, on Earth, meeting the parents usually just involves awkward small talk and casseroles." Siren smirked. "Here it involves ancestral judgment and public shaming rituals." He gave her a deadpan look. "That's comforting." Later that day, they stood before the obsidian hull, a massive structure perched high above the cliffs. Carved directly into the mountainside, its walls etched with glowing glyphs. Dozens of Velasari guards flanked the steps, all heavily armed, all staring at him like they were. It's already picturing his bones being used as ceremonial flute material. Siren walked beside him, upright and proud. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't pretending either. She wanted her father to meet him, which scared Kellen more than the spears. Inside the hall, air was thick with heat and energy. Ancient tech pulsed through the stone. The floor felt alive. Sitting at the far end of the chamber on a throne made of obsidian bones, and light was Kelther. Kellen didn't need Siren to tell him who he was. The man's presence was a gravitational force. Tall, broad, with piercing violet eyes and a gaze that could kill a ship's engine at 100 meters. His armor looked like it had scars. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a quiet rumble that made the air vibrate. "So, this is the human." Kellen stepped forward, chest tight, spine straight. "Yes, sir." Kelther didn't blink. "You survived the ritual. You won the challenge. You drew blood from a bonded male. That is... inconvenient." Kellen swallowed. "Sorry." Kelther's face didn't change. "Tradition matters. What you did should not have been possible. Our males are bred for endurance, strength, biological dominance." Kellen nodded. "I'm aware. And yet you stand, not as prey, but as a mate. He nodded again, still adjusting to that part. Siren stepped forward. Father, Kelthar held up a hand. When you were born, Siren, I told your mother no one would ever be worthy. Shh. No one could match your fire. She blinked. You said they'd die trying. That too. He stood, the air rippling with tension as he approached Kellen. The room went quiet. You are not of our blood. You do not understand our instincts. You do not feel the hunger we do during mating cycles. Yet, you did not run. Kellen held his ground. Out. No, I didn't. You stood before Jader and fought like a fool. I've been called worse. Pause. Kelthar's eyes narrowed. You are small. Your skin is soft. Your muscles are weak. But you have something our warriors often lack. Kellen blinked. Sarcasm? Strength? The commander said flatly. And that, may be the rarest strength of all. There was silence, tense, thick. Then Kelthar gave the slightest nod. I will not oppose this union, he said. Siren exhaled audibly. Kellen blinked. Wait? Really? But Kelthar added, there is one condition. Kellen immediately regretted asking. You must join the rite of guardianship. Kellen frowned. What is that? Kelthar said, combat, culture, bonding ritual comprehension, and genetic discipline. You will live among us. You will earn your place beside her. Not just through mating, but through transformation. Siren looked stunned. Father, it is the only way, he said. Kellen slowly nodded. All right. Karen turned to him, eyes wide. Kellen, you don't have to. No, he said, voice steady. If I'm going to be part of this, I don't want to just survive. I want to understand it. I want to understand you. Kelthar studied him for a long moment. Then the first time, something passed across his face. Not quite a smile, but something close. You begin tomorrow. That night, Siren took Kellen to a quiet overlook high above the trees. Stars stretched across the sky in a ribbon of light. 2 moons hung low, their glow casting everything in soft silver. They sat together, legs touching, sharing a flask of something sweet and spicy. You didn't have to say yes, she said. I know, he replied. But if I'm going to earn your people's respect, I want to do it right. She looked at him for a long time. You're going to suffer. Probably. You'll bleed. Definitely. You'll have to fight warriors who've trained since they could crawl. I can roll pretty well. You might not pass. He took her hand. Then I'll try again. She shook her head, smiling despite herself. You're ridiculous. Human, he said. That's kind of our brand. They leaned into each other, and for a long time they said nothing. Just sat under the stars, 2 people from different worlds, daring to love each other anyway. Tomorrow, Kellen would begin a brutal training to prove he was more than just a lucky survivor. He'd train not to conquer the Velassa, but to belong. With them, and with her, the rite of guardianship. Began at dawn. Kellen's first test came before he even stepped into the training grounds. Getting out of bed, every joint ached. His muscles felt like someone had rearranged them in the night and forgotten to put the padding back. He groaned as he sat up, brushing moss from his hair and blinking against the pale jungle light streaming through the open skylight of the Velassa guest quarters. Siren was already up, course stretching outside in that fluid panther-like, the way that only someone who'd trained to fight jungle beasts and court death daily could manage. She didn't look sweaty. Kellen, on the other hand, looked like a man who'd been mildly mugged by gravity. You're late, she said as he limped over. Time's relative, he wheezed. So's pain, apparently. She smirked. You'll get used to it, or I'll die dramatically in front of a training crowd, and they'll write songs about the stubborn human. Ain't that's an option too? The rite began with a welcoming ceremony, if you could call, being surrounded by silent warriors who stared at him like he was an off-brand alien fruit welcoming. A towering female instructor named Kailash approached. She wore battle-scarred armor and had a gaze that could melt rock. You are the outsider who mated with one of our strongest, she said, voice sharp and deep, and survived. Kellen nodded. That's me, still not exploded. A few of the trainees laughed. Kailash did not. We will see if you are worthy of her bond. He glanced at Siren. No pressure. And then came the tests. Day 1, physical trial. They dropped him into a jungle arena filled with humid fog, hanging vines and creatures that probably had too many teeth. Kailash shouted instructions. Climb the stone wall. Traverse the web bridge. Avoid the venomous reed serpents. Venomous. What now? Begin. Kellen ran, or more accurately stumbled forward. The stone wall was slick with dew. He slipped 3 times before hauling himself up, using pure desperation and what might have been prayer. The web bridge, not actually a bridge. It was a series of bouncing cords strung between trees, clearly designed for species with tails, extra limbs, or a better sense of balance. He fell twice. The reed serpents? Friendly if your idea of friendly was getting hissed at, while narrowly avoiding paralyzing venom. Still, he made it, barely collapsing at the finish, soaked in sweat, legs twitching. He saw Siren crouched beside him, smiling. You made it. Did I win? You didn't die? He blinked. That counts. It's the only part that counts. Day 3. Neural conditioning. Velassa warriors train their minds as much as their bodies. Kellen was hooked into a neural feedback loop, an ancient artifact that injected hallucinations based on deep fear responses. In other words, alien VR horror show. He faced simulations of his worst memories, his old shipmate dying in a failed DH evacuation, being abandoned on an asteroid for 6 days with only canned tuna and a broken cum unit, and worse, having to explain feelings. But the worst hallucination? Losing Siren, watching her fade into mist while he stood powerless too? Stop it. He broke the simulation. No screaming, no breakdown, just stood up and ripped the neural cable out of the socket. Panting, Kailash watched from behind the observation crystal. Humans don't suppress emotion, she said. No, Siren replied. They fight through it. Kailash gave the barest of nods. Day 6. Biological compatibility. Testing. Kellen stood in a glowing chamber surrounded by medical tech that hummed and buzzed like an angry beehive. He was shirtless. Again, Velassa medical protocols apparently required a lot of skin. Dr. Vatha, a biologist with luminous green eyes and a tone like a polite knife, examined him like he was a piece of exotic furniture. Your bonding hormone levels are anomalously high for a non-native. Kellen blinked. That a bad thing? Not at all, she said. In fact, your body seems to have adapted to Velassa pheromone responses. Unheard of. Kellen shifted nervously. Define. Adapted. Your dopamine and oxytocin receptors are more active than any human sample on record. You are forming something close to a biochemical mate lock. Wait, like imprinting, in a way, but it seems to be mutual. That night, Siren sat across from him, stirring a bowl of thick, spicy stew that smelled like burnt stars and cinnamon. So, you're chemically addicted to me, she teased. Just means I'm not leaving, he said, dipping bread into his bowl. You say that now, but the ride isn't over. The final test's tomorrow. Ellen raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. Battle a war beast? Wrestle your uncle? She shook her head, eyes serious now. No. The final test is called. You don't choose it. The right chooses based on your progress. That made him pause, like a personality test from hell. Exactly. The next day, the elders gathered in a circular chamber known as the Stone of Shaping, where paths were declared. The High Priestess, a slender figure made entirely of muscle, bone tattoos, and riddles, stood beside a pool of shimmering liquid, and dropped in a bloodstone etched with Kellen's name. The surface rippled, then glowed. The final test. It's one of choice, she intoned. Murmurs swept through the chamber. Kailash frowned. Sireness's expression turned grim. Kellen stepped forward. Choice between what? The elder's voice echoed. Through the chamber, you will be offered 2 doors. One leads to exile, safety, a life of comfort on your own terms. The other leads to a life among US, but not with her. Kellen blinked. Wait, what? If you choose the clan, you lose your bond. If you choose her, you remain an outsider forever. No titles, no place. You live as she does in the shadow. He stood frozen, his heart pounded. Siren stepped forward. Don't decide yet? I don't need to, he said. She stared. I've faced death, venom, simulated grief, and a warrior who tried to turn me into a human kebab. But nothing scares me more than the idea of losing you. Kellen turned to the priestess. I choose her. The room went completely still. Even the glowing water paused. Then it turned gold. The elder smiled faintly. He chooses with both. Heart and clarity. A rare thing. Kelther stepped forward, his massive form casting a long shadow. Then let it be known, the human has completed the rite, not as a guardian, not as an initiate, but as something new. Siren reached out, taking Kellen's hand. He is mine, she said, and I am hers, Kellen replied. And that night, there were no more tests. No weapons, no rules, just 2 people from different stars lying side by side in the glowing quiet of the Velassa moonlight. 1 heartbeat, 1 future, and for the first time since he crash-landed, Kellen knew exactly where he belonged. Asterisk. The jungle shimmered in golden light. Soft wind rustled the silver-leaf trees surrounding the Velassa temple courtyard. Where hundreds had gathered, warriors stood shoulder to shoulder with scholars, elders with initiates, and off-world dignitaries blinked through their translator implants as the ceremony began. No one could quite believe it was happening. The first human was about to bond with a Velassa, not just a coupling, a true bond, recognized, witnessed, etched into both law and biology. Kellen Drake adjusted the ceremonial sash around his shoulder. The fabric glowed faintly, warm against his skin, as if alive. It had been spun from Siren's clan-light thread, a tradition passed down through generations. She'd woven it herself. You clean up all right? A voice said behind him. He turned and grinned. Siren stood in her formal armor, sleek and ceremonial. No weapons. Her hair was braided and pinned with starlight stones. She looked both radiant and a little nervous. A rare thing for a woman who once speared a jungle beast without blinking. I feel like I'm wearing a mood lamp, Kellen said. She smirked. It's supposed to respond to your body chemistry. It glows brighter when your heart rate rises. He looked down. So, this thing's going to be flashing like a nightclub all day? Probably. They walked together into the center of the open ring as the High Elder approached with the bonding orb, a crystalline sphere pulsing with energy. Inside it was a suspended thread of silver and gold light, a living neural thread harvested from the Velassa bond tree, said to form a mental link when accepted by both partners. Traditionally, this link was only shared by pure-blooded Velassa. Until now, the Elder held it between them. Do you accept the bond, knowing it is permanent? Knowing your minds, your futures, and your legacies will be joined? Siren didn't hesitate. I do. Kellen took a deep breath. You sure? It won't explode? The Elder raised one disapproving eyebrow. Right. Sorry, he muttered. Then, I do. Together, they reached forward and touched the orb. It pulsed, bright, blinding, and then silence. For a moment, Kellen felt everything. Her thoughts, her fears, her joy. It wasn't words exactly. It was emotion made real, flowing into him like breath. He could feel her love like a second heartbeat. And she could feel him, the broken edges of his past, the stubborn core of his will, the part of him that had chosen her over everything else. Then the light faded and the bond was complete. No applause, just stillness. Even the jungle quieted. Kelther, her father, stepped forward. The commander, who had once glared at Kellen like he was a walking insult, now held out a ceremonial dagger. "It is tradition for the father of the bonded to mark the new path," he said. "You may refuse." Kellen didn't. He stepped forward and let the man press the flat of the blade to his shoulder. It pulsed with blue light, then etched a single glowing glyph onto his skin, a mark that shimmered and faded into a permanent, faint tattoo, the glyph for chosen. Not taken, not conquered. Chosen. Kelthor met his eyes. "You are one of us now, not because you fought, not because you've survived, but because you stayed when leaving would have been easier." Kellen nodded. "Thanks, Dad." A few warriors nearby coughed to hide their laughter. Later, when the rituals were done and the stars were out, Kellen and Siren lay beneath the sky. On the temple's upper terrace, the jungle spreading out below them like a dream. "Think they'll write about us?" he asked. "They already are," she said. "There's a ballad in the works. They're called The Flame That Did Not Burn. Sounds like a bad cologne." She grinned. "There's also a Holovid proposal. You're being played by a Terran acta. They're making your anatomy a central plot point." He groaned. "Oh God. It's going to be that kind of movie, isn't it?" "Yes," she said cheerfully. Velassa audiences are very curious about human endurance now.
Ellen.
Turned on his side, propping himself on one elbow. "So what now? Do I guard the clan? Take up a spear? Train initiates in sarcasm?" She shook her head. "No. You advise. You challenge. You remind us that tradition can bend and we'll build something new. Together, kids," he asked casually. Her expression softened. One day he nodded. "I'd like to raise little silver-skinned maniacs who ask too many questions. They'll be fierce. They'll be yours. And yours," she whispered. Pulling him closer, they kissed under the stars, not with desperation this time, but with the quiet certainty of something that had been earned. Not just a bond of passion or pleasure, but of trust, of will back. On Earth, he'd been a drifting ex-engineer, a rogue scavenger looking for parts in Pides. Now, he was the first human bonded in Velassa history, the first to complete the rite, the first to make them laugh, the first to stay, and in staying, he hadn't just earned a mate, he'd changed a species. All because he refused to leave after one incredible night. As the moons rose higher, glowing over their joined hands, a simple truth echoed across two hearts. One alien, one human. Sometimes the strongest warriors don't carry weapons. They carry love and humans. Well, they don't explode, they endure the end. But maybe the beginning of a new series. Closing parenthesis, asterisk.